Oh my God. Hey, Allie, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank y'all for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So I thought that you could share with us your experience and maybe some stories of battling with endometriosis. And just what it's been like really and like finding a diagnosis for it.
Okay, so first I think I'll start. I might go black for a second. The screen might for a second.
No problem. That's okay.
I'm going to read to y'all so people know exactly what endometriosis is.
Oh,
so
great.
Endometriosis occurs when the tissue resembling the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus, attaching itself to other pelvic and abdominal organs, causing scarring, lesions, is that it? Adhesions, and cysts. So that's just a little of what it is. So I think when I started my period when I was 12. So when you're young, you just think that that's just how it's supposed to be. Like you're supposed to be in pain because I don't know. I mean, I had two older cousins. So I just took off y'all's experiences like, oh, this is what mine's going to be like. And
right.
I mean, we grew up together and then I still lived in Michigan because I was in 6th grade. So I still lived in Michigan at this time. So I guess as I got older, I started having worse periods. And for a while, I just talked it up to me being like dramatic and stuff. And then I think when I was 14, I just moved to Memphis. I think I was in 8th or 9th grade. My mom took me to my OBGYN in Memphis. And he had brought up like, oh, maybe it's endometriosis. We can figure it out by putting you on the pill. Well, what 14-year-old wants to go on the pill? I mean, I was so embarrassed because of the negative connotations with being on the pill. So,
and probably like embarrassed to go to an OBGYN at 14 years old anyways.
So embarrassed. The one thing that helped me was my mom, my OBGYN in Memphis actually delivered me when I was a baby.
That is really cool.
So it just came full circle. So, and it helped because all of my mom's friends had gone to see him. But I mean, yeah, it was embarrassing. Like I felt so embarrassed because you're 14, you're already awkward.
Right.
Now you're having to do things that you didn't think that you would have to do until you're like 18. And so I'm like, oh, or like 21, I think, because I have friends who didn't go to a gyno until like they were 21.
So this is going to be like TMI, but so like when you started going, did you have to get like PAPs when you were that young? Did they have to do like a pelvic exam? Okay.
But pelvic exams. Like I've been pelvic exam literally since I was 14.
Wow.
But to me, that was just so normal. Like to me, it was like, I mean, luckily, thank God for my mom because she just normalized it for me like right off the bat. Like she was like, this is what's going to happen. And then it just became like a running joke in my family of like going to the doctor.
Right.
Because y'all know my dad, he has to make a joke out of everything. So of course he had, but it helped me because it really did normalize it for me. So I went on the pill and then I was on the same one for 2 years. And then I started having, which I still have, but it got worse towards the 2-year mark. I started having really bad cramps to where like I would throw up at the hospital. And it would happen like not even necessarily when I was just on my period. It would just happen all around it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so that at that point, like we couldn't narrow it down to like, this was my period. It was just like, oh, she's probably stomach ulcer or something like this, you know?
Right. Yeah. Something going on.
And so I saw so many doctors and my gyno kept saying like, I think it's endometriosis, but the only way we can find out, which is still true to this day, the only way you can find out if you have endometriosis is surgery. And Melissa, you probably know the medical term, but I'm going to say it wrong. It's like a laparoscopic surgery.
Yeah.
There's a certain word for it, but it's kind of like that or something. But I'm a teacher. I am not a doctor. So that was the only way you could find out. Well, they didn't want to do the surgery at 14 or 15. They wanted me to wait till I was in my early 20s because that's closer to having kids, and it's just easier if they get rid of all the scar tissue, and then it's easier to get pregnant.
Okay.
So basically, just all throughout high school, I was miserable. Like, it got to the point where I would take the pill consistently so I wouldn't have periods because I would otherwise be miserable.
So,
And,
like, can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
Would you have to, like, miss school for the pain that you would get around your period, or
miss school, I was a nanny in high school. I would miss work. I was in the ER a lot, and nobody knew what was wrong. So it was like a never ending cycle of going to the ER, missing school, getting behind in school, and then having to catch up. And I mean, thank God I cared about school. Otherwise, I could have been so behind.
Yeah.
So what were some of, like, the symptoms that you were having that you would be, like, missing school for? Just, like, pain or heavy bleeding?
So it was really, really bad cramps. And it wasn't
Okay.
even like lower abdomen. Is that right? Yeah.
Yep.
Cramps. It was like lower back pain. And then it would cause, up until my period, it would be all over my stomach pain. So a lot of times we would think I had appendicitis because it's all over.
Right.
And then it went from that to maybe it's just the birth control I'm on. So it was always trial and error. And then it was consistently me missing school. And finally, like, I remember my senior year of high school, I had missed days. And even with the doctor, after 10 days, like, you get a note sent home. And I couldn't miss a single day for the rest of the year, which obviously I didn't want to miss school. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a social butterfly. I would love school.
Right.
I just remember I got that letter home that I missed 10 days, and it being like I couldn't miss again, doctor's note or not.
That's
And
crazy.
I mean, now obviously that I have a diagnosis, I probably would have been able to miss, but in my school's eyes, oh, this girl's just missing and has a doctor's note, you know?
That's one thing I was going to say is I remember being in high school, and a gym teacher who is no longer there, I remember him being like, just so you know, girls, periods are not an excuse to not participate in gym class. And, like, I'm still baffled that he said that, because, like, in your situation, or like other young girls who don't have a diagnosis of it, like, they actually can be in that much pain where they can't participate. And, like,
Right.
Sorry, who are you to decide that? Because
Yeah.
didn't you say, you were saying this earlier, and he said, like, the pain's not that bad.
Yeah.
Like, cramps aren't that bad. Okay, who are you? Have you ever had them? Have you ever had a period?
Yeah.
Like,
and they are
no.
for some people.
So sit down.
Right.
Not your place.
So that's so funny you say that, because I just last night, I follow this Instagram account called Living with Endometriosis. And I sent my mom a thing that said one of, like, the top 20, I think top 15, I don't know, it was one of those most painful conditions is endometriosis. And I'm like, see, I told you I was not lying all those years of how much pain I was in.
I believe it. The definition you said, it's like where tissue is growing, like, onto other
Yeah.
organs. Like, that doesn't sound comfortable.
And so I remember, so obviously that all happened. I saw the same doctor in Memphis, changed my birth control. And the problem with changing your birth control is each birth control has a different effect on your body. So I went from being this tiny little 100-pound girl to now I've gained a lot of weight. And I mean, yeah, I could chalk it up as college and eating bad and, like, not exercising, but I did not do that in high school. Like, I literally lived the same life, just doing, just, like, honestly drinking.
Yeah.
But even now, I guess to backtrack a bit, it's hard because each birth control really did have a different effect on my body. And so my senior year of college, so like a year and a half ago, I went and saw a doctor in Knoxville, because now I see doctors specialized in endometriosis.
Okay.
Because that's just the best thing for me now, is somebody who's specialized in what's happening. So I saw this doctor in Knoxville, and he was an infertility doctor who specialized in endometriosis. And he was incredible. But I was 21, and seeing a infertility doctor at 21 is a little terrifying, especially when you're 6 hours away from your parents.
Yeah.
And they're asking you all these questions, and I'm like, I'm nowhere near getting married, nowhere near even having the thought of wanting to have kids. Like, this is a little too much for me. But there were so many things that he was able to do for me that like cleared in my head, like, okay, so this is probably my diagnosis. Like, I've just always said like I had endometriosis. I just knew. And the doctors knew, but they just didn't want to do surgery because I wasn't old enough, I guess. And so he was the one who said, like, you need to have surgery now because you might have to have it again later. And if I have to have that surgery again, I'll not be okay. But
so after that, like when he said that, what was the process like up until getting surgery? Like, did you have to go to the doctor frequently, or did you have to?
So COVID changed a lot of it because I was supposed to have a glucose test to see my insulin levels because they think I could also have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, which still undiagnosed right now. We don't really know, but if you look it up, I have like every single symptom. But anyways, that was supposed to figure that out. But obviously COVID hit in March and I saw him in December. Well, when COVID hit, I moved to Florida because I didn't want to be 12 hours away in a pandemic. So I found a new doctor here that specialized in endometriosis, and he wanted to kind of see how I was for a few before surgery. And then after a month of being my doctor, and I think I saw him 4 times that month, he was like, we're scheduling surgery.
Wow.
I had surgery in August. And it was a lot of going to the doctor. And a lot of times I felt like I was not like begging for them to understand what I was going through, but a lot of times being like, please fix me. Like, up until surgery, like those few months during quarantine, it was like I was miserable. Like June and July, I couldn't even, like, I remember the Spies came to see us, and a lot of times after like I would eat, I'd have to like go in my room and lay down because I was like, I'm gonna get sick. Or like and I mean, thank God they're like family. Otherwise, I would have felt horrible.
Right.
But it was constant, like every time foods would start triggering me and I wouldn't know what foods. It would just be like any day I'd eat, it could be like, oh, here's another episode. Like, I'm not going to be okay. And so up until then, it was bad. It was like constantly laying in bed, not feeling like everything I did hurt, and constantly like laying on the bathroom floor, begging my mom to take me to the ER. And y'all know her. She's like, but yeah. And then a lot at the time I wasn't working. So obviously I didn't want to wake up my parents because they were working. So I would wake up Travis, and Travis would just have to sit with me in the bathroom while I was like laying on the floor, like crying. And I took a lot of hot baths. But then, yeah.
So like what did your like friends think? Like, did a lot of people make you feel like you were like making it up? I feel like
a lot of times, like, I feel like I was the person with like, oh, her stomach always hurts.
It's just like, anxiety or
people would say it was anxiety, which I do think anxiety probably played a role into it because I never knew what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
So it was like constantly being undiagnosed and being anxious about that. And being like, oh my gosh, like what's wrong with me? And I mean, then I would get in my head and be like, well, what if I am just making it up? Like, what if this isn't even a thing?
Yeah.
But my mom always believed me, which was great because
well, and it sounds like your doctors knew too if they wanted to do surgery.
And my mom, I remember in July, my mom just kept being like, you just have to hold on for a few more weeks. Like, surgery is in 3 weeks. You can hang on, you know? And I mean, at that point, it had been 8 years. So it's like, okay, I can go a few more weeks.
Right.
But yeah. And then truthfully, I thought after surgery, it would be like, I'd wake up a new person. And I think the months after surgery, like the 3-4 months after surgery, were like the worst it's ever been.
Really?
Yeah. Besides my wisdom teeth, I'd never had surgery before, so it was very new to me. But I bled, sorry for the TMI, I bled for 8 weeks straight. And it was
like heavy bleeding?
it was like I was going through a pad every hour.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
bad. And I knew it was bad when my dad, because like I couldn't drive, so my dad would take me to the doctor, and I went in there and it was horrible. Like after, I genuinely thought, which also I had surgery during COVID, so at this time I couldn't have anyone in the hospital with me
Yeah.
No.
for surgery. Never been alone.
Right.
And
Well, and
my mom
especially
just-
like that, like you said, that was basically your first surgery besides wisdom teeth. And so not being able to have anyone in there with you.
and my mom just had to
crazy.
drop me off at like 4 a.m, and then she got a call when to come get me.
That is
And
so
I remember waking up, and I mean, everybody wakes up from surgery in pain, but I just remember being like, I just want to lay in my bed, but I could not get, because I just couldn't get comfortable in a hospital bed. So I'm like, please
Yeah.
take me.
right.
But I remember waking up and being like, where am I? Like, where is my mother? Because you wake up and you're like, where? I don't know any of these people.
Right.
But after like the first 2 weeks, I knew the first 2 weeks were going to be rough because I was kind of prepared for that, at least a little bit.
So real quick, for anybody who isn't familiar with like having surgery for endometriosis, what was the surgery like? Was it like, did they go like vaginally? Did they like have to like cut you open? What was it?
Oh yeah. So I had, I don't know how to describe it, but I had one on my belly button. They cut through
Okay.
and now on each side.
Okay.
So originally he was only supposed to go through my belly button. But I guess when he got in there, it was way worse than he thought. So he had to cut me open on the sides because he was like, oh, we're just in one incision, we'll be good.
Yeah.
And then when I got in there, he was like, I had to open you up more. So that was my first question when I woke up, because I'm like, well, how bad was it? Like, did I really make this up? Like, surely I did.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe I just had surgery for no reason. Because I mean, that was still a possibility of like, I couldn't have had it. And I just, I mean, I knew I had it. Like,
What did they actually like take out? Like, what was it?
So I actually have pictures of it. So they take out like all this scar tissue, and it was all like white around all my body. And
Okay.
I had some scar tissue like leaning up against my colon, which is why I was always so sick.
Oh my gosh.
It had spread all over. So yeah, so I mean, I said it spread like it's something horrible, but there was a lot of scar tissue that
Yeah.
But it is bad.
yeah. So that I'll have to show you pictures later, but there was like this one huge, they used a term for it that I can't remember, but it like scarred my mom looking at the picture because it was like huge. It was like a big, it was disgusting. And I show my friends now to make them grossed out, but
You're so nice.
I know. But yeah, so after that, when I woke up, I realized I had 3 incisions. So I was like, oh, it was bad. I mean, not bad, but I knew it was worse than we had expected.
Right.
But yeah, so then the 2 weeks 2 weeks after that, I thought, okay, this is going to be rough. Like, I basically was on bed rest. I get up every few hours. And I don't know if this happened to you with your surgery, but nobody tells you about the pain in your shoulders from gas. Like, they had to I guess they blow up your stomach or something so they can, I don't know. My mom was explaining it to me.
Okay.
But apparently there was there was a lot of gas that they put in you or something. I have no idea. Somebody that's in the medical field is going to watch this and be like, who is this girl? All I know is no one told me the pain in my shoulders. Like,
Oh my gosh.
it was so bad. I mean, for the first 3 days, I literally thought I was dying. And I'm dramatic, but I've never been in that pain before.
Wow.
But then it got better. It was just the bleeding and the cramps were still there. But it was like, I used to get headaches with it too. And I just recently found out that my headaches were in correlation to my endometriosis. I just thought headaches.
Yeah. So what is it like now? Is your like pain a lot better when you're on your period or?
Yeah, so it's a lot better. I'm definitely really glad I had the surgery, but I wasn't glad until like January.
Okay.
Because I didn't have like a normal period until January because after surgery, I started having to stop the bleeding. I had to have 6 birth control a day.
Oh my God.
It was 6.
And so what did that do to your body? Like, did you feel like your hormones were like weird?
So, yeah, I felt like I was all over the place. And I was getting ready to start my first job as a teacher.
Right.
So, and living in a pandemic away from like all my friends and like everything I've ever known, it was really hard.
Oh my God.
But I knew in the back of my head, like, eventually this is going to be worth it. So I'm like, you just have to keep pushing. But I did have a few times where I was like, am I never going to stop bleeding? And then seeing like how my parents started to get scared with how much I was bleeding, because it was like a lot. Like, I remember going to the doctor and feeling like he just didn't understand. And I sat on the table. And when I stood up, it was like a murder scene.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. And like, of course I start crying because I'm like so scared.
Right.
At that moment, he's like calling the other doctors and I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? And my dad is just sitting outside in the car. And I text him and I'm like, Dad, something's wrong. They just had to get, and he's like, it's okay. He's trying to be calm. And I just felt so bad for him because I walked out and I was just bawling because they had to do like a catheter, like whatever.
Yeah.
And they could have told me that it was going to hurt, but they didn't. They must have left that part out.
So mad about it.
But it was just a lot. But now that I like have gone through it, I'm really glad. And I know there's a possibility that the scar tissue does come back and I have to have surgery again. But in my mind, that's totally worth it if I get to be a mom.
Yeah, right. That was a question that I had. So like, you had said when you went to that doctor in the other side of Tennessee. So like the Nashville side, you had said that he mentioned the word infertility. Like, is that still a possibility, or did you have to get like eggs froze, or what was
So I guess since now I'm 23, so I am like closer than I was 2 years ago to having kids. And I mean, I don't know what the future holds. So now it's more of like, I could start thinking more about seeing like an infertility doctor. But I do know that a lot of people with endometriosis struggle with getting pregnant.
Okay. So it's just an unknown right now.
Yeah. So it's very unknown. And it's kind of one of those things that like, I know ultimately, like every doctor in the world could tell me I'm not going to have kids, but it's up to God.
Yeah.
And like, I know that eventually I'm supposed to be a mom, whether that be my own kids or adoption or whatever. I know that I'm going to be a mom, and
right.
I actually was telling one of my friends about that the other day, how I think it's better for me not to know those things right now because I mean, that's just too much. I guess.
Yeah, you don't need that anxiety over it right now. Like when it's supposed to happen, it will. And like you said, whether you have your own kids or you adopt, like there's so many ways that you can be a mom.
Right.
You don't just have to be biological.
Right. And I know I know a lot of people that have done IVF.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people with endometriosis that have had IVF. So I'm like, there's always that. I mean, science is incredible nowadays. So I always remind myself that I'm like, it's really not, and I love doctors, but I mean, obviously, like in my eyes, at least, that like, it is up to God. Like I'm going to have as many kids as God wants me to have.
Yeah.
And I know my parents can't wait to be grandparents. So I'm like, I'll give them to y'all.
Yeah.
Like, it's also something that like, if I have to have a second surgery just to have kids, like it would be so worth it to me.
Yeah.
Right.
And so now I have started to like really start doing more research on how to like take care of my body with endometriosis, and just trying to help myself become more healthy and live a healthier lifestyle with it. Um, and that's ultimately because if there's ways I can help myself in the future to where I can have kids, then like obviously I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, kids aren't really in my mind right now. I mean, I would
Right.
love to be a mom right now, but that's just not what's going to happen. But
So what type of lifestyle changes did you have to make or like choose to make after you started researching like how to help yourself through the endometriosis?
so a lot of the foods that I eat, I've realized that I'm like, oh, probably shouldn't eat all of that. And I noticed that a lot of people, and a lot of the things I've read are like endometriosis and PCOS. And a lot of the things, I can read y'all one of them that said about what to eat. Oh, which I already do. I eat so much cheese. And I am not a yogurt fan, but I've started to eat yogurt. And
Okay, that helps then.
yeah, and red
Okay.
meat, fish, and eggs, chicken, and chickpeas.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure when I'll get to the chickpeas part.
They're
But
so good in like salads if you do
Really?
like peppers and cucumbers and tomatoes and then do some like olive oil and lemon juice, salt and pepper. So good.
okay, I could see myself doing it. It's just I already eat a lot of not a lot of red meat, but I love steak and I love fish, and cheese. So a lot of the things, it's more of like eating that instead of, I love, like I could eat every single fries, like you name it, like any type of fry, I'll eat it. I just love potatoes, but I'm really trying to cut those out.
Yeah.
I mean, and just like a lot of things that I know aren't good for me. And drinking, I mean, I'm drinking a Sprite right now, but I drink so much water. And I only have this because I found it in my makeup bag, but I don't know if y'all have ever had Liquid IV. This is not an ad.
Yeah.
This is not an ad.
I have.
But this has literally changed my life. I have one of these like probably like every other day, and it's 3 water bottles. One of these equals 3 water bottles.
Whoa.
Yeah, you like mix it in with water.
Okay.
So good.
Where do you
They
even
have, like,
get
different
it?
flavors.
You can the store
Online.
basically.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
You can get them at Target. They're more expensive at Target.
Okay.
Or you can order them online, and I just love it. Like, I just think any step, and I try to exercise a lot more now.
Okay.
Whether that literally just be like walking to the house I'm dog sitting at, or walking to the park, or walking to the beach, or something like that. Like, I've noticed that if I start taking care of myself now, it's only going to help me later. And I wish I would have done it years ago, but I mean,
You live and you learn.
So with what you've gone through, do you think it's like super important to like encourage other women and young girls to like talk about periods and talk about bleeding and like help them learn about what's normal and what's abnormal when it comes to periods?
Oh, absolutely. Because I wish I would have talked about it more. Like, and just knowing that, like, I saw this thing that 200 million people in the world are diagnosed with endometriosis. So, and think about how many people are undiagnosed.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because it took 8 years for me to really have a diagnosis. I mean, we
Yeah.
knew, but we didn't know for sure. So I think talking about things and talking and like knowing that if you're in a lot of pain, you're not supposed to be in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And I think,
And like that, it's okay to admit that you're in pain
Ex-
too, right? Like I feel like girls are so like seasoned to just like accept the fact that they're in pain and cramping and bleeding heavy because you're a girl and you're supposed to have your period. Well, there's a way that periods are supposed to go and there's a way that they're not. And like clearly you were one of those that you did have a condition.
Right. And I think that a lot of times, like I know growing up, like we just, like you said, like we just are like, well, this is how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in pain, but you're not. And it's okay if you are.
Yeah.
That's why I think even just like, I feel like I've learned so much just from talking about it with other people. And I'm sure my friends have learned a lot because like I talk about it a lot too. And I think when we learn, it's just like any condition that is out there, like the more we talk about it, the more we know. But I feel like when it comes to periods and stuff, we don't talk about those things. I mean, think about when you first started your period. Like, Lizzie, I'm sure you only told Melissa, like, you just get,
Right.
why is that so embarrassing? I have no idea.
I know. I think it was like a couple weeks ago, I posted my story like about how I was having like just I had 3 periods in 1 month, and it was February too, which is a short month. So it was like irritating. So I like posted about it. But before I posted, I almost asked Melissa if that was like okay to post. I was thinking in my head, like, should I post that or is that weird? Like, no, it's not weird. I'm a woman and I have a period. Newsflash. Like,
Right.
it's weird. And I remember like so many girls commented on my story and were like, oh my gosh, this is worse. Like, da 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 da. Normalize talking about this. And then I remember I got a message request from like some random guy that I don't even know who he is or whatever. And it was he like commented the emoji with like the thermometer in their mouth, which is like, and I was like, I so wanted to just like reply and like blow up on him, but I didn't know who he was. It was like someone that doesn't even follow me. I don't follow them. So I just like obviously deleted the request and blocked him. But like, really?
Yeah.
Like,
first of
that's,
all, you're a
that's
man.
why,
You know
exactly.
nothing about
But, and
periods.
that's why guys, or that's why girls don't want to, is because of people like that like make it seem like we're some odd creature because I
Right.
talked about having a period.
But there's even girls that I know like that when you complain about like cramps that are like, oh, suck it up, deal with it. Okay, well, like just because yours aren't bad doesn't mean
Right.
that the person's next to you isn't.
Right.
And like I going back to like that gym teacher, like I firmly believe like having your period is not an excuse to call into work. But if your employee or your coworker has a doctor's note and it's something that they have a condition for that they're
Right.
being treated for, like you should not put shame on them for having to call in for it.
Right. Right. And I've even noticed with my 8th graders that they like make comments. Like sometimes, like if I'm in a bad mood, which a lot of times I try not to be in a bad mood at work because it's just
Yes.
not worth it. But like sometimes, like I'll get a little sassy with them. And half the time they deserve it. Like they deserve my sarcastic remarks.
Yeah.
And um just because that's just how I am. Like I do everything with humor.
Yeah.
And some of the kids in my class will be like, oh, Miss A is on her period. And I'm like, that's just rude. And that makes,
Right.
I mean, I don't care what a 14-year-old says, but how do you think that makes the other girls in your class feel?
Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Especially being in 8th grade, like it's still uncomfortable at that age,
yeah.
especially coming from like a guy too. Like we're already uncomfortable. Like our boobs are changing, like
Right.
our hormones are
Well, and,
changing.
like,
we're bleeding every month, and like
I remember, like, I did not get my period until the summer going into my 9th grade year.
Oh.
And I felt like
Oh,
so embarrassed that I didn't because all of my friends did. And so, like,
right.
if I would have heard a guy say that, like, that would have made me start feeling super uncomfortable because I hadn't had mine. And so, like, I don't know. It just, like, I don't know. I just feel like 8th grade is such a hard time because, again, like, you have girls who are starting their period and they don't know about it. And then there's girls who aren't because it is, like, depends on your body, really.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, my mom didn't start hers, I think, till she was like 17. And I started at 12.
wow,
Like, what? I was in 6th.
that is crazy.
So I've started to normalize it with like the girls in my classes. Like I openly talk about it with them, and I eat lunch with a lot of the girls just because of COVID. Like the kids have to be split up. And so a lot of girls eat with me, and like we talk about it all the time. Like I keep pads and tampons in my desk, and they'll just like come in my room and like be like, "Hey, can I have one?" And but I do that because a lot of times, like, you know, I don't feel that old, but I mean, it was like, I don't know, like 10 years ago that I was in 8th grade. That's so weird. But I just remember I didn't have somebody doing that for me, like talking
Right.
about me. And I wish I would have had someone doing that for me because
not everybody has parents like you at home that will like listen to you and believe you and take you to the
Right.
doctor and something's wrong.
And so I even have the girls talk to me about like UTIs. And they're like, Miss Arthur, I got, and I'm like, okay, like, I'm like, we've all had them. It's a girl thing. You know,
Right.
a lot of times the kids like don't want to talk about these things because like we said, like, it's kind of embarrassing. And like, but like you said, like, you don't really not everybody has their friends and their family to like lean on at this time. So that's why I always make sure that like the kids know, like, you can always tell me those things. Like, I am not going to judge you. And chances are I've literally been there.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I really appreciate you being like brave enough to share your story with us today, because not everybody has somebody like you to hear the stories and relate to. Some people probably just think they're crazy with what's going on, or it's normal, and then they go undiagnosed. And like, so just thank you for being so brave to share that with us.
Of course. Thank y'all for having me.
Yes, of course. Well, I guess that is all then. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Have fun at the beach.
Of course. Thank you. I love y'all.
Love you too. Bye.
Bye.